Hi everyone, it's Artist from Man Carpentry. In today's video I'm going to show you how I fit a new door in a new lining. So it is quite similar to, obviously I have a previous video where you can see how I fitted new door in old lining. This is quite similar, but because especially if you have fitted new linings and you're sure about your tools that they are level, true, then it is slightly easier because you've got less to offer in door into the opening. You still can do that if you feel that you need to, but in general, when you fit your door into the new lining, obviously you two things you can do. You can do it as you would do with an old lining, you offer in every time, or you can measure, offer it in once to see if the door is square to the frame, and if it is, then you can allow 5mm for gap, especially if you got these 3-inch hinges overall, because that will give you about 2.5mm gap on between door and a frame, which should be enough for the paint to be applied and keep that equal gap surrounding the frame and between frame and the door. So I'll just do this to show you how I do it. But basically what I do, I get a door, obviously my frame, I check the measurements, and I tend to plane door before I actually swing it, because I know I need about 5mm in total for two sides of gaps. And I will, the first job I'll do is I will offer it into the frame just to make sure that frame is square. So I'll get my door. This is the door in question for us. So I'll get my door. Also, on the doors, what you need to check is which side is the lock side, because for some door manufacturers they write down which side should be used for locks. Like for instance here you can see that's lock side, so hinge side obviously will be on the other side, and I have this always as a top with these numbers etc, with this writing facing that as a top, and then obviously hinge side will be other side. For the job you will require a electric planer, you will require plunge saw with the rail, a router, not necessarily a router, you can do it by hand, but it makes your life easier. These are my self-made, I call them T-props. I use them in staggered position, and that way when one side goes against here, another side goes against there, that way they support the door without need of clamping, but you can clamp. Also you're going to need a mallet, drill, combi drill and an impact driver, or combi drill only depending on what you're doing, and obviously a chisel set. So the first step I do, which you can use it from the set, if you obviously you're gonna have a new lining, new everything, so you will have set available of the doorstop. So I use that as my guide, which you will see in my previous videos. So I mark this represents the top gap. I allow like 2.5mm for that. Then I go 150 down for the first hinge, and around 200mm over the bottom of the door is my second hinge. in this occasion it will be only 2 hinges because the doors are light. So they don't really need 3 hinges. And obviously you check that depending on the door weight to see how many hinges you need. But these light, feather light doors don't need really more than 2 hinges. So yeah, so once you got your stick ready, you marked where your hinges will be. So I always put X, so you got it on right side as well when you're marking your hinges out. So the first job I do, I offer it into the position to make sure the door is square to the opening. And if it isn't, you check what's the cause, but it should be because obviously we have used laser level to fit the lining head, and I've used level, which I know is level at the time of the fitting the lining, which is very important to remember. So you always need to check your tools because they tend to obviously not stay level. So yeah, I'm fitting the door first and we go from there. So the first... Hi everyone, whilst doing the doors, wanted to just share something with you. Basically, moral is always check the doors whether they're square or not, just in case, because I have one. I'll show you, I haven't trimmed it. So this is factory edge and this is factory edge. As you can see, all the writing's on. So I have had it before, must say, with slightly more expensive doors. So you can see it's say 2072 say, and this is 207, well, nearly 2075. So it's 3 mil out of level. And how I spotted that, because obviously, as you know, we fitted the linings with laser level on a head, and I've checked the bubble I've used, that is level, at least it was at the time of doing the linings. So I checked that, and as you can see, that is spot on. So which means that obviously the door ain't square. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Even though if you say 100% confident that you fit or have fitted all the linings spot on, I would still suggest offering door in a opening before you're fitting it, because you could have a nasty surprise like this where door isn't square, and obviously, you know, it could cause you some trouble if you haven't allowed enough or trimmed it to fit in a position. So always check before fitting, no matter how cheap or expensive doors are. Don't trust the manufacturers, because they obviously not perfect either. Not always. Most times they are, but not always. So as I said, I have had it with more expensive doors where they're a couple mil out of square. So obviously it does matter when you fit the door to get those gaps nice and equal. So yeah, I thought I'll just share that with you and I'll get back onto it. So we know that's the lock. That's the hinge. So let's see what we got. That's alright. It's not bad. Not bad. So we got about 4 mil. So we got about 4 mil gap. We need a little plane just to get that ideal gap, and just get tape measure. So 17, 16. Okay, so right, and this. What you could have, if you got, is a blue packer, which is 5mm. You can use that. I'll just measure this time. So yeah, we got 3.5mm, so we need 1.5mm of the door to get our 5mm gap overall. So I'll take this door in here. So once you've planed it, you want to offer in a position. That's enough. That's five and a little bit. So that should be plenty. So once you've done that, go back on your bench so you can cut your hinges in. Also, you get the right side. So also, before I cut in hinges, I check. Sometimes on these doors there's like a lip, which is just annoying. So I put my sander on it gently, just to flatten it so it looks better. It doesn't take long, so I'll do that, and afterwards I will put hinges on. So the next step, what we do is get our stick. So, as I said, this is the top hinge, that is the bottom hinge. So I will offer the stick with this line, not the top, but with this line on the door, lining up with the top of the door, because this is your lining, so that is your gap. You can straight away go and mark it on the frame. So remember, this goes against top of your door frame, because that mark there represents the door, and the top of the actual stick is your door lining. So mark the top. That's marked. Get the hinge. So I always use this side to mark it, because this I will align to the either edge of the lining or edge of the door. That should be the right position if your frames are parallel, and they should be when they're new. So it's different if you obviously fit the old door in old lining, new door in old lining, then you would only align it for the door, and then you would have to see where you are with actual door frame and use the side and adjust it accordingly to fit. But for the new, you align it with this edge. So I mark that. I will get the actual, I'll get chisel, now score it and then route it out. So next I will use router with the guide. I've set up the depth of the hinge so it's just slightly proud, just slightly. And the reason being with these smaller hinges, what happens, or if you do it flush, then the gap on the door is slightly too small, I think, because you also need to allow for paints, etc. So hence why I make it so it's instead of 2mm, 2.5 or near 3 all the way around. So that is definitely then enough, you know, to cover yourself for after paint has been done, so you don't have to, no rubbing anyway. So that's why I do. So I do it slightly proud, slightly, not too much, but so it gives me 2.5, 3mm gap on the hinge side, and then I will obviously accordingly make the same gap on the handle side. So we've done the hinges on the frame. So I repeat and do the same on the door. Mark them up and then cut them in. Next step I'll do is I'll pre-drill the screw holes for where hinges get screwed in. On the door I do always all of them, but on the frame, even though it's a new frame, I just do central, and that is purely because obviously with the new frame you shouldn't have any problems, but I'll just keep that that way, because when I'm doing like old doors, or sorry, old frames, then sometimes you got to move it on a frame, the seat, where the seat is, where you sit the door. So if you pre-drill all, then you're making the frame weaker. Hence why on an actual frame I usually do just a central pre-drill, and then once I'm happy with the way the door sits, I drill others. So door is on. We got a nice gap everywhere, and basically this is another reason why I suggest always fitting the door first. So if you got a slightly gap, got a slight sort of issues or you're not happy with it, if you haven't fitted the archtrace first, because a lot of people do that and they shoot themselves in the foot because they can't adjust the frame as easily. So I would suggest fitting archtrace always after you've done your door into the frame and you're happy with all the gaps, because what it gives you option always to adjust it with the folding wedges. You can always, you know, adjust the frame or the gap for the frame so it fits better, rather than taking, you know, taking the archtrace off again and it's just messing around. It gives you a lot of extra work. So yeah, I'm happy with this gap, with this door. I will make separate video on how to fit archtrace, or how I fit archtrace and how to fit lock, because otherwise it's going to be too long of a video, and I want them kept, you know, shortish so you can actually enjoy it rather than, you know, being bored. So that will be the next video. So yeah, obviously subscribe, leave a like, and I'll catch you with you in the next video.